Thanks, Adele. Welcome, everybody. And tonight on the webinar, I'm going to be doing just an introductory piece, framing up and reminding us all of the important things about TLC. And then Judy Walker and Kerry, Kerry, I've just lost your name for a moment. Kerry Murray-Lowy are going to take you through authenticity. So they'll take you through all the details of the authenticity and the underlying drivers and the mindsets and etc. Or the things that we've done in each of the webinars. So just to reorient you to the TLC, in terms of the design criteria for the leadership circle, one of the key points of leverage is that we enable clients to understand that it's ultimately all about strengths. And you're all familiar with that because we emphasize that quite strongly in certification. So there's nothing to judge, nothing to see as good or bad, but rather to understand. And of course, as we always talk about, the reactive tendencies have great gifts in them. In fact, that's really the purpose of the reactive tendencies, the constructive purpose of the reactive tendencies, is that we develop all of these skills and capabilities whilst the reactivity is active. And then what we're seeking to do is harvest the strengths that lie within it and actually to be able to transform it in a way that we let go of the aspects of it that can become unhelpful or limiting. So the TLC specifically has been designed to, sorry, I've just lost a screen here, has been designed to really take on the challenges of in the current modern world. And particularly, this is to manage the complexity. And you're all familiar with that from the certification. So this is the 6th in the series of the webinars. And this is really about, we wanted to walk around and dive much more deeply into the dimensions of the circle so that you can really get a deeper sense and a deeper experience of each of these dimensions. So as I mentioned earlier, today, as you know, is about authenticity, and that covers the sub-dimensions of integrity and courageous authenticity. So we'll focus on the gifts and strengths and also the strategies for managing our default patterns and the habits and patterns, and really look at how does authenticity show up in words and actions, how it shows up in our body and our intentions. So as Adele has beautifully indicated, we're going to welcome your contributions in deepening the understanding, because a number of you have been working with this for a good period of time, and a number of you have knowledge of this from your, even before you got your certification with the TLC. So we really want to harvest all of the experiences that you have. So when we get to that stage in the presentation, we'll open up and include not just your questions, but also your experiences as well. So we've been through protocols and questions and comments, and we'll talk about the next webinar at the end of the program. Oh, here we are. That would have helped Kerry, wouldn't it, if I had that up? So Judy and Kerry are going to take you through the details of the material on authenticity. So we're very lucky to have them because both of them are highly experienced practitioners. They've been working with the TLC for 6 years. And as you know, Judy's on the faculty of the certification, and Kerry's the founder of On Course Consulting Company. So we've been through complying, controlling, protecting, achieving, relating, and now we're at authenticity. So on we go. So just a refresh of the Leadership Circle profile, and just to bring back into your awareness the Manager Edition as well. And of course with the Manager Edition there's a slight difference in the structure, and you'll notice that whereas we have the 5 dimensions in the LCP, the Leadership Circle profile, we have the 3 summary dimensions in the Manager Edition: relating, being, and achieving. And of course in that design there was the taking out of the systems awareness and a couple of the self-awareness items, and then bringing that together into the being dimension. So you can see 2 from self-awareness and 2 from authenticity. So this is where these items from today's program will sit. And of course the slight changes in the lower part of the circle as well. So we have the creative competencies, and as you know, these are leadership competencies. It's one of the things I love about the TLC, that it's very specifically looking at leadership competencies as they affect business performance outcome. And also, as you know, very much with the structure of the TLC, we are actually looking at the notion that structure determines performance. So if there's an organizing structure, then certain performance will arise that reflects that structure underneath. So when we think of the creative competencies, we're thinking about what's the underlying structure, beliefs and assumptions, etc., that will produce the behaviors that actually deliver those competencies. So typically what we've looked at here, or what's been researched here, is the aspect of leadership effectiveness and enduring business performance. So these competencies actually delivering on those things. And if you want to refresh your memory about these things, of course there's the webinar that talks about the statistics and the validity, which some of you enjoy immensely and others would leave alone quietly. But that's an opportunity to really understand that for the people who really need to know what are the nuts and bolts that sit underneath the profile. So just to refresh you with that. And of course the reactive tendencies, again, structure determining performance, and the structure in this case being the beliefs and assumptions that we hold. So the structure in the creative is the beliefs and assumptions that we hold that will deliver the creative, and the reactive, it's the beliefs and assumptions that we hold that will deliver the reactive tendencies. So of course the challenge in the reactive is when things are either overextended or underutilized, and this can be traced back, as many of you would have experienced with doing your what's at risk exercise, to the self-limiting assumptions. So internal assumptions being our habits of thought and patterns of behavior. So I'm learning to juggle all the bits. So of course that's what sits in what you now all are very familiar with, the whole circle profile. Now on the top half, of course, we have the 18 creative competencies, and the bottom half, the 11 reactive styles. And then of course in the center, the inner circle gives us these 8 summary dimensions. And as you experience when you work with the profile, when you look in the center, you really start to see the pattern. And of course the key in the TLC is actually the pattern. What is the pattern that you're seeing, and what's the implication of the pattern? So that's where there's a high degree of potency in looking at the profile. So and this is, of course, the Manager Edition, just so that you see the distinction. So we've got the 12 creative competencies on the top half, the 9 reactive styles on the bottom, and the 6 inner circle summary dimensions. So the adult stages of development, which of course this is a very important distinguishing feature of the TLC, and goes right to this notion again of structure determines performance. So again, if we think of each of the stages of development, forms a structure, an internal structure that determines how we respond. And as we know, moving up the different stages of development, as we move, for instance, from egocentric to reactive, what we're able to do is include more than we could at the egocentric. So this is the expanded complexity of mind. So, and of course we know this in the transition from being a teenager into a socialized adult, that actually there's a greater complexity of mind that's available to us. And as we move up each of the stages of development, so too is this capacity for a greater level of complexity and a more sophisticated meaning-making system and different mental models that are actually operating. So as it expands, we can include more, and as we start to appreciate this, it allows us to actually include more of the other and more of the environment, so that we can sit with the complexity of multiple perspectives and be able to hold that until the meaning making allows us to respect all that's on offer within that complexity. And so as we think of the complexity of the world in which we live, and particularly as we move beyond creative into integral, and many of the problems that we're seeking to solve, as beautifully said by Einstein, wasn't it? We can't solve the problems at the level that we created them. So these different stages of development are really allowing a greater capacity to respond to these very complex and conflicting demands, so that we can meet them in a good way. And of course we go right up to the unitive as well. So increasing levels of complexity of mind, and this is enabling us to work with the complexity of the world. And of course, what this also does, particularly as we move beyond the creative and into integral, is deepening our capacity for compassion and being able to include people from very, very diverse perspectives. There's a huge potency of that. And of course, all of these have great strengths within them. And of course, each stage also has limitations in them. So there's an asset to be really harvested in each of these different stages of development. So we've got, keep going, Sarah, the leadership competencies. So that's the 18 creative competencies that sit in the top in the top half here. And then, of course, we have the reactive tendencies and the limiting beliefs and assumptions, and then the adult stages of development. So we see all the distinctive features of the TLC there in the way it's assembled. So, that's the familiar distinction between the creative and the reactive. So the key here is the operating system of performance. So what the TLC is really focusing on is the consciousness and the effectiveness that comes with that level of consciousness, and what then becomes available to us, and what's possible in our leadership if we can take full advantage of all these aspects of understanding the different operating systems and how they impact our performance. Now, what's really important about this, and many of you will remember this from certification, is that we can be in a big rush to develop the stages of development and move through them. And this is a trap, because we actually need to harvest what are all the gifts of a certain stage, and a certain stage is a prerequisite for the next stage. Now, of course, as we know, this doesn't happen in a completely linear way. It happens in a kind of forward, backward, or a jagged kind of way, but the center of gravity gradually shifting. But it is actually important that if somebody's needing many more skills to fully harvest the reactive, then we'd be better investing our time in working on them harvesting those skills and really expanding their capacity at the skill level to be able to make the shift to the next stage of development. So one of the ways to think about this is that we're really developing people's operating system, so the internal capacity to make meaning, to process the experience, to respond to the experience that they're having. So there's this deep capacity to understand their internal operating system and how to work with that. And that's why we so strongly talk about there is both the inner journey of development as well as the outer journey. And there's actually a communication between these two things. And the more perspective we're able to take and the better we're able to understand that and work with that, then that's actually what makes the transition possible through the stages of development. I had to disengage from I hope I didn't do that loudly in your ears. I had to disengage from my microphone. So here we have the competencies, creative competencies, and here we have relating. And so relating consists of care and connection, fostering team play, collaborator, mentoring, developing, and interpersonal intelligence. All of these things you're very familiar with by now. And next is self-awareness, which includes, of course, selfless leader, balance, composure, and personal learner. And then authenticity, which is integrity and courageous authenticity. And then systems awareness, being community concern, sustainable productivity, and systems thinking. And of course, achieving with the dimensions there, strategic focus, purposeful and visionary, achieving results and decisiveness. And then if we focus in on authenticity, which is the purpose of this evening, and of course those two, courageous authenticity and integrity being the key to that dimension. And of course, we realize that this, if we think about the 4-tent model, this is the center pole on which all leadership is leveraged. So by having respectable scores in this particular dimension, it really gives a key pillar to your leadership. And of course, those of us who've worked with clients, we know this experience of what a shock it is for clients when these scores are low. And how important it becomes to them to actually work with these dimensions. So very key. So what we're going to be covering tonight is these things. So we'll be covering the mindset that goes with it, the physiology, so we know what's actually going on in the body and we can connect with what's going on in the body. And then the felt sense in terms of how does it impact on us. And how we can actually track the impact and what emotions go with it. We'll be looking at the tonality so we can see what happens with our voice and our speech and the language that we use and the behaviours that follow and the attentions that sit within these dimensions, and then of course what's at risk and the underlying beliefs. So I now have great pleasure in inviting Judy and Kerry to take you through these aspects of the authenticity competencies.
Thank you, Sarah, and great to be working with you and Kerry, and welcome everybody. So we're going to now have a look at the first item there, which is mindset. So if we can have the next slide, please, Sarah. Great, thanks. So as you know, mindsets are a powerful influence on how we show up. And as we've discussed, the inner circle of authenticity is made up of the creative competencies of integrity and courageous authenticity. And the authenticity structure measures the extent to which your leadership is an expression of your true self, and the ability to bring up undiscussables and handle conflicts as they happen. And I guess for me, the word that comes to mind when I think about authenticity is congruence. And I heard a great definition of congruence recently, which is when what we're thinking and what we're saying and what we're feeling are all in alignment. So I don't know if ever you've had an experience where you've walked away from a conversation with somebody and you just get that sense that something's not quite right. You don't quite know what it is, but it just doesn't feel right. And for me, what's happening there is you're picking up a lack of congruence. Either they're not saying what they're feeling, or you're just picking up something that's not in alignment. So with the authenticity structure, there's an abundance of openness and honesty, which builds trust with people because, people know where they stand with you. You say what you think. And yet at the same time, it takes a lot of courage at times. So it's all about playing to win together. This, of course, comes from the work of Larry Wilson. And this is not in the sense of being competitive to win over. It's not at expense of others. It is in order to achieve the purpose and the vision for the greater good. So the congruence really shows up, what you see is what you get. I say what I mean and I do what I say. Yeah. I value resolving conflict. In fact, I feel out of integrity with myself if I don't resolve conflict and I don't raise those difficult issues. People high in authenticity will comment on the elephant in the room and be really willing to work on that together. They voice their opinions, even if they're controversial. So they respect your opinion, even though they might disagree with it, but they'll do it respectfully, willing to take risks, comfortable with authority. So they don't have problems challenging upwards because, for them, remember, identity is right in the center of the circle. And because their identity is secure, they don't need the approval of others. What they're focused on is getting the outcome that matters most. So in that way, they use their influence for a higher purpose rather than for personal gain. So it's very much, a self-authoring, inside-out operating system. And really, when you think about the journey from reactive to creative, it takes three practices. One is that ability to really focus on the purpose and the vision. And then to get to know, to befriend your doubts and your fears, to be able to challenge them, and then engage in some courageous conversations. So, Kerry, Sarah, do you have anything you want to add to the mindset piece?
Sounds good, Judy.
Great, thanks.
Kerry?
No, I think it's well described. Thanks, Judy.
Okay, lovely. So over to you, Kerry, for having a look at physiology.
Oh, physiology. Right. Sorry, I was prepared for another slide, so I just have to go back and. Okay, so physiology. So, when I'm in the experience of people who I am sensing have an authenticity about the way that they express themselves, physiologically, there's a sense, as the first point talks about, that there's some connectedness in relationship to the other person, but it's not intrusive. So there's a sort of and all the neuroscience actually can describe to us now what is actually happening in our brain when that's actually occurring. But there's something that is connected. There's maybe direct eye contact, or it's connected eye contact. There's a sense of people being connected. Grounded and centered. You have a felt sense that people are connected to the earth, that they're connected to themselves in relationship to what's actually happening. Their legs are slightly apart, so any of the martial arts that anybody's been exposed to, that there's that sense of groundedness with legs apart, knees unlocked. So there's no rigidity about the way that their physiology is presenting. Open with a intention for to be available, to be interested in engaging with that groundedness of clarity and honesty. So the martial art of Aikido talks quite a lot about being grounded through the center of your gravity to the trees in the earth, but to be able to flex. So there's that sense that I feel when people are authentic with that open stance. Poised for connection and engagement, so a willingness to connect, ready to go. We've already mentioned the eye contact, not intrusive, so that must be a point somehow that it's turning up twice that we really need to be thinking about in terms of authenticity. Because I think, that area of eye contact, as we know, in different cultures too, eye contact in terms of non-verbals has a different association. So I think just because someone might not be giving eye contact doesn't necessarily mean that they're not connected and authentic to what their experience is. The ability to have peripheral awareness, so that's that idea that they can take in a number of different senses at the same time, are not so focused on one particular dimension that they're overly focused on that. Use pauses to allow time for understanding, comfortable with pauses. In fact, see pauses as a way of enabling people to connect and to stay centered, to modulate their tone, and then mirroring and matching body language for congruence. So that sense of, I think this is particularly important maybe when you're dealing with or experiencing someone who has a high intense emotional expression that they're actually expressing, being able to still match your body language to connect with that so that it's not a submissive stance is an important aspect. So Jude and Sarah, anything to add?
I think the thing that, just as you were talking, it came to me that there's this sense of safety that I think when you're in this physiology, that everything about you is receptive, so even though you might be taking a strong position, I think this is where some people, misunderstand between critical and arrogant and courageous authenticity, that that you actually exude a sense of safety that we can talk about whatever we need to talk about. I think that's something quite important.
Thank you. I like that.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I agree. The physiology is very strong. It's centered. It's confident, and that's because they're not tied to what people think about what they say. They're more focused on being true to themselves, to their thoughts, their feelings, whilst being aware of the other people's thoughts and feelings too. But they're focused on the bigger picture. What can we do with this? Yeah.
Well said.
So, of course, their physiology then has a direct relationship with the internal felt sense. So that's a nice segue into the next slide. So, look, we're conscious of not stereotyping. These are examples only. There's lots more, and there'll be exceptions as well. And certainly after this slide, we might just check in to see if anybody else wants to add any thoughts that they've got. So in the meantime, when we look at authenticity structure and the internal felt sense, because people strong in authenticity, they have the ability to be really present. You feel like you're the only person in the world when they're talking to you. They're really with you and listening to your point of view, you know, regardless of the situation or the amount of tension that they're encountering. So that they're very connected to and very aware of their internal felt sense. And because of that, you know, that they feel very self-assured and confident. And because of that, that internal trust that they have in themselves, and at the same time, you know, being connected to that bigger picture, they therefore have trust in the world and in others, and their belief, you know, the bottom line belief is together we can achieve our purpose, aligned with the values. So their vision of what can be is very clear for them. And as this is their focus, they're not hooked by what others think of them. So their sense of self's not threatened by others' opinions. And because they value truth and honesty so much, and they're energetic and they're enthusiastic in their expression of possibilities, which brings people along with them. And I guess because their ego is not at stake, this really enables them to feel courageous in bringing up those undiscussables and to be able to stand in the heat, you know, when emotions are high, as they're focused on bringing into being what matters most. So there's a high degree of courage and honesty during those emotionally charged conversations and discussions. And they know that by staying connected, which is what they're very good at doing, so connected to both the person and the purpose, then they can manage whatever comes up. So really at the bottom of all of this, their confidence and their courage forms their internal felt sense. So again, Sarah, Kerry.
Well said. Nothing to add. I'd love to hear from other people too.
Yes, shall we open it up for a minute?
We have no one with their hands up, ladies.
I think it's
excuse me. But yes,
I think it's I'd love to hear when you are in contact yourselves with your authenticity, is there anything, I think sometimes it's easier to think about when I move into that space, what's present for me. And does anyone have anything to add when they think about when you move into this space and you know the difference between reactively trying and versus creatively being in this integrity and courageous authenticity? Well, if we haven't got any comments or hands up, or we'll move on. We'll assume that we're doing a good job.
There's just received, ladies, just received a comment in from Barbara, who's having technical difficulties, saying she notices a stillness when I'm in this space.
Lovely. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very nice. Okay, so maybe over to you, Kerry.
Okay. Yeah, so when I'm experiencing myself as authentically as I can in the moment, the key thing that I notice about myself is that my anxiety is not as high. So even though, you know, particularly if I think about some of the situations where I have been in, where I may have decided to speak up about things that I know were not going to be easily heard or well received, I'm not saying that I don't have an internal charge that I feel, but the anxiety and I can often, you know, feel it. It's more centered, and it more sits in the bottom half of my stomach rather than in the top half of my chest. And I think that links to people who are, when you're experiencing authenticity, you're tuned in to your emotional experience. So you're not, I'm not, or people are not, what I've experienced, not disassociated from their emotional experience. And they use their emotions as signals to let them know what's going on for themselves. And they're also able to tune in to what's happening for others in their emotional world. They also have emotional literacy, so as well as being able to have that body sense of what's actually happening, there's a way of describing them, and the way of describing them is without, you know, judgment, taking accountability for this is my own experience of myself, and using them, as I said, as signals to tell us what we need to pay attention to. And so the kinds of emotions that we thought people express when they're expressing authenticity is a sense of courage. You know, often when people are in situations where, particularly linked to courageous authenticity, where they need to express what needs to be expressed, but even not necessarily the dimension of speaking up, but that felt sense that one actually has that I'm in alignment. Sometimes it takes courage to place oneself in that internal emotional experience where I'm in authenticity with my inner world and my outer world. A sense of passion, so committed, as Judy said, to a higher purpose, something bigger is at stake here in a constructive way, a creative way, not a reactive way. So I've got a sense of movement forward in terms of being committed to something that's bigger. Fearless, or as I said earlier, fearless in that sense of that fear is not driving us. The amygdala, in terms of the brain, well, it might have grabbed us, but we're actually working with it effectively. A sense of self-love, so people who are authentic, emotional compassion for oneself, non-judgment for oneself, accepting oneself for where one is in the moment, and having that real sense of self-acceptance and self-love. Enthusiastic for opportunity and potential, or for just what is, a confidence about themselves, and that we've talked about. There's a sort of, and both Judy and Sarah have mentioned it, that reciprocal nature, the emotional reciprocity that occurs, where I'm appreciative of somebody else's perspective, not just because it might add to my own perspective, but because it actually creates something bigger and greater, that idea that, you know, together we're greater. Gratitude has become such a relevant and important aspect of how we go about living our lives. And, you know, fortunately, you know, Sarah and I in the last couple of days have been at a conference on mindful leadership, and I was just so, I don't know whether it's relieved, maybe it's not relieved, but just felt so met by many of the conversations that were taking place at that conference. And lots of, in the presenters, the people around, people noticing and being grateful for the small things that people were doing, and taking the time to comment and pay attention to that. So that sense of, you know, gratitude, and gratitude not just for others, but gratitude for self, and gratitude for the bigger experience that we are blessed to participate in.
And I think also, Kerry, there's something there about, in the line of courageous authenticity, you know, gratitude for the difference of opinions, gratitude for the willingness for somebody to take a risk and say something dissenting. You know, so the gratitude extends, you know, beyond the, if you like, the comfortable things to the uncomfortable things as well.
Yes, yes, yes. And I think linked to that is that other point that talks about, you know, the genuine valuing of others and the contributions, isn't it? And not seeing, you know, small and large accomplishments. But I particularly like what you're saying, Sarah, about, you know, yeah, I know when I'm in the situation where I know or I observe that someone takes a risk to be bigger or greater than what they thought they could be, or what the situation requires of them, and they go into that space, you're quite right. I value that immensely, and I'm very grateful for them for taking that opportunity.
Mm.
Mm.
So anything else to add to that?
Yeah, just as you were talking, we've talked a little bit about the ability of people that are strong in authenticity in terms of being able to tune into what's happening for others. And in terms of being around the emotions when they're expressed by somebody with high authenticity, I feel safe around those emotions. You know, even if a strongly authentic person is giving me feedback that might be challenging for me to take on board, I know that their intention is for a higher purpose. You know, it's to help me to be the best that I can be. It's value-based, and I can easily take the feedback on board and trust them. Whereas, you know, maybe somebody that's high in complying might sugarcoat, you know, their emotions and what they want to say. So I don't really get what they're saying. Or alternatively, somebody high in controlling. They might be so strong in, you know, got to do it my way, versus maybe, you know, questioning and listening for the reason that I did or didn't do something my way. And I may feel that they come across as a bully and not appreciative of my perspectives. So yeah, I feel very safe around authenticity. Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But I think it's also counterintuitive, you know, because I think people through a reactive lens, you know, are worried that by being themselves and speaking up that this will all go bad, you know.
Yes.
You know, and paradoxically it doesn't. I just noticed that we have a question from Renee, or Renee. How do I say it, Renee? Is it Renee, I think? Can you please say more about physiology? And I'm not sure what she added. Can we get Renee unmuted? Is that possible? Adele?
Yes. Yes,
Any luck,
Renee.
Adele?
Yes. Can you hear us, Renee?
Yes, I can hear.
Yeah. Would you like to ask your question?
I think I just want to know more about, I think in detail or maybe specifically about what is that has peripheral awareness in physiology.
You mean that I actually notice things at the periphery of my awareness rather than just the thing that I'm focused on. And so in other words, I'm noticing things almost at a 180-degree level of awareness rather than, you know, just sort of this mid-range. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, this is the first time for me to know this word's peripheral, right?
Yeah, peripheral.
Yeah, my understanding is that maybe this the awareness here we mentioned about should be higher and bigger.
Yes.
Level, right?
Yeah. And I think that's what happens in the physiology. Let's say, and Judy and Kerry have been speaking about this. Let's say I'm aware of an intense emotion, and somehow I can be aware of that emotion, notice what's going on in my body, but not need to do something to resolve what's going in my body. And be informed what I'm experiencing. So, for instance, maybe I'm feeling fear or anger or resentment or, you know, whatever I'm feeling, and I can sit with that and not need to resolve it. I realize I'm not the emotion, I'm having an emotion. And I think that's to do with this expanded awareness that comes. So, you know, that ability to notice what's going on in our body but not need to actually do anything about it per se, but to harvest the awareness that that's actually bringing. Does that speak to that for you?
Wonderful, Sarah. That's very clear. It's a little bit like Chinese philosophy, like Tao or Confucius philosophy, maybe from the Buddhism. Something happen on our body, externally or internally. We just keep watching it without doing anything toward it. So we call that watching it. That's
watching it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything, Judy or Kerry, to say about that?
I think you've expressed that beautifully. Thanks, Sarah.
Should we go on to the next one?
Sure.
Thanks, Renee, for your comment. That was great.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, so we started talking about mindsets and internal felt sense and emotions, and all of that, of course, then has a very strong connection to how we come across when we're speaking. So again, these are just examples, but because the authenticity structure is one of honesty and trust, a lot of courage and that congruence, when people with high authenticity, when they have something important to say, they really want to be heard. So their pitch is therefore very clear, and it's strong and it's focused. Whereas with people, and you may have noticed this, with people who are not so internally confident, there's often almost a question at the end of their statements. And you can hear that there's a lack of being sure about what they're saying. So yeah, very, very clear, strong and focused. But even though they have a strong point of view, their focus, as we've spoken about, is for the best outcome. It's really to focus on what matters most. And with their awareness of what's going on for other people, they're very conscious of different perspectives. So they're very connected with the people that they're speaking with, who might have different perspectives. So therefore, their voice is connected, it's inviting, and there's a real willingness to explore versus, my way is right, having it my way. You'll notice that the pace can vary from fast, slow, or medium. And this really depends on the circumstances and the people with whom they're speaking. So because they're so connected, they seem to just innately know when and with whom to speak faster or slower. And remember, authenticity sits beside self-awareness. So they are very aware of the impact of what they're saying, and more importantly, how they're saying it to others. And they'll adapt their communication style accordingly. So, however, as they're focused on the best outcome, they will be powerful, they will be centered, and they will be congruent in the opinion that they're getting across, whilst at the same time showing that willingness to listen to others. So, open to any further input. Sarah, Kerry, or anyone else?
Yeah, I think you've said it beautifully, Judy. That flexibility and ability to meet people where they are, I think is what's such a strong feature.
Great. Okay, so then of course the voice, it's then the words that they speak. So over to you, Kerry, the language.
Yes. So as Judy was saying, it's when we're being authentic, we're very connected to the statements and the questions that we're using. So very, very clear that our intention is to influence and connect with the language that we're using. So very purposeful with choosing and deciding what words we're going to bring into relationship with others. And so we just put together down a couple of examples of the kinds of things that we have heard or thought that people would say when they're authentic, and we'd love, after we've had a look at those, to see what other people may have, examples that they may have. So as Judy's already mentioned, a language of honesty and being congruent, so particularly focused on the bigger perspective that's at hand. So let's here focus on our vision, not my vision. What do we intend to bring into being? So that idea of being focused on a much larger picture that's there. Often we are able, when we're being authentic, is to have conversations about values. As you're aware from your own TLC and having worked with clients, and Sarah already mentioned it, that integrity in particular is one of those dimensions that when people see that it's not as high as they expected it to be, people can get quite shocked and disappointed, because often what they're going to be confronted with is the fact that their internal values and the external values are not aligned, and that's not a very easy place for people to find themselves in. So often you will have people, when they're being authentic, that there's a lot of conversations about values. So are our values aligned? How do we explore the gap? So already mentioned that it's not about that there's a problem to have differences, it's what's in the gap that's there, and out of that gap and the exploration of the gap, can we find something bigger and greater than what we thought was possible in the beginning. Courageous enough to have conversations about what are the obstacles, and what's the question there is quite important about, let's talk about what's really getting in the way. Courageous authenticity, in particular, enables people to bring what's not being said out into the open, or at least invite people to do that. It may be that you can't force people to speak about the things that they're concerned about speaking about, but the invitation is there with questions like, so what are you really saying? What are we not saying? So what's being said and what's not being said? I've already mentioned that I hear what you're saying and I have a different perspective, so being inclusive rather than exclusive about thoughts and ideas in the words that are being used. Inviting people to think about and to reflect upon what matters most to me and to them. So that language of possibility and invitation is there. Making a statement. Oh, sorry, my screen's just gone off. Right, just lost the slide. Okay.
Damn.
Right, okay, slide is back. A momentary pause, or what was it, Sarah? The mindfulness, but purposeful pause.
Purposeful pause.
That's right. Being courageous enough to speak up when the direction that people are heading or the organisation's actually heading does not align with my own values, and speaking up about that in a way that invites a conversation about that and taking ownership. I think the words that people use when we're being authentic is we take accountability. As I said, it's purposeful, it's intentional, and I take accountability for my response, what's happening for me, and how do I bring that out into relationship with others. So I have difficulty supporting the direction in we're heading. I'll take responsibility for my part in this, and open to invite and to discuss those emotional areas that people are sometimes unwilling to bring out into the open, particularly areas of discontent, fear and frustrations. I think that's particularly important. I don't know, I was working with a client recently where their culture, they've got a big transformational agenda that they're on, and it's people are trying to sort of work out where their alignments actually are in terms of their own personal values and where the organisation's actually going. And one of the leaders that I was working with was sort of, he's got high critical in his TLC, and he was talking to me about the fact that we don't really want people to be expressing their discontent, their fear and their frustration. And he was talking about the words that people were using in particular, and he was talking to me about, you know, what kinds of questions could he ask of them to quickly enable them to shift to a different state through the words that he was actually using. And we had a really interesting conversation about why did he think that he needed to do that. And of course, the intention in my purposeful, authentic conversation was to enable him to reflect upon the fact that he himself was uncomfortable with his own, you know, fear and worry and frustration about what's actually happening. And so by using language to distract people or to move people too quickly away from that emotional state was a lot about, equally as much about him as what was happening in the organisation. And we talked about the value of people being able to stay in the experience and have the expression of their fears and their worries, and how could they go about doing that. And the last statement, I'm successful because we are successful. So we've talked quite a bit about that it's an inclusive, not an exclusive orientation. So my success is your success, and how do we go about creating that together in the words that we use. So I'd be interested to hear from Sarah and Judy, but other people, in terms of what other statements do they have heard or they think are reflective of real authentic communication and engagement. Anything?
Oh, Arlene has a question. I'll just unmute you, Arlene.
Fantastic.
Go ahead. Ah, she's got, yes. I think you're on mute yourself, Arlene.
Or is she on the other, one device she's looking at things and the other device she's got,
True. I'll unmute
see
both.
how she's entered twice?
There we are, Arlene. You should be able to talk now.
Yeah, I'm fine now, yes.
Good.
Thank you for that. It's more of a comment really in relation to this, because I have one of the roles I work with, the Chief Executive Officer, really is very authentic in the way that she works with people. And just listening to you bringing this all one together, she's a metaphorical thinker, of course, so she often uses a metaphor to bring people together and to have people thinking around that. But it's just the honesty that's there within. She uses a metaphor of about, many people use buses, all different things, but just that authenticity in the words that she's using help people understand that it's okay whether you're in the boat, on the boat, trailing behind the boat, you're way up in front to guide the boat. It's the language that's used is very supportive and encouraging of people, and I certainly have seen that area of using those words and that determination around being, it's okay to hear other people's points of view and still be strong in where that's coming from, without buying into it has to be me that's right. I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to hear. So it's been a very useful discussion so far. Thank you, Kerry and Sarah.
And as you were talking, I was reminded of the power of metaphor and the power of narrative. You know, in terms of the stories. And I think what I have noticed about people who I experience to be authentic is that if they're telling a story and it's not their story, they'll let other people know that it's not their story, and that they're they're still quite connected to the story that's actually there, but they won't take ownership of that, and that they use narrative particularly well in a very meaningful and purposeful way. So thank you for reminding me of that as well.
That's great. The other thing that I'm noticing as I look at the words is most of them are questions, which is, you know, very much again about inviting other perspectives so that, you know, we can work together and move towards what really needs to happen right now.
Yeah, I think there's something in that too, Judy, about, and I'm going to loop back to my previous comment about safety and link it back to this creating safety to bring up doubts and fears and frustrations and, you know, all the things that we normally pretend we don't have. But there's actually that invitation, as you described, for everything to be, or, you know.
Yes. Lovely. Yeah, because they walk the talk, their words are not just words, they're reflective in behaviours due to their high value on congruence. So let's have a look at some behaviours now. So the authenticity structure, it demonstrates, you know, an intention to show up in a way that is courageous and at the same time congruent with that intention to move forward. It's the ability to achieve the best outcome, not settling for anything less, and just bringing into being that whatever it is that matters in this moment, even if that means bringing up the elephant in the room that hasn't been spoken about for the last 6 meetings that we've had. There's a willingness to take a stand and support their vision, even if that's risky. So they're strongly connected to, and they live their own values, so they will support the organisational values when aligned. Yet, because of their courage and the fact that their identity is not at stake, they have a different relationship with authority to those that, you know, might be high in the reactive structure. So they're willing to challenge authority directly if required for the greater good, and particularly when there's non-alignment between personal values and those of the organisation. They'll bring up the undiscussables, deal openly with potential conflicts, share personal feelings and vulnerabilities honestly. And actually, I was thinking just a little while ago, I was working with a client just in the last couple of days, and he had a very strong profile generally. He was very strong both with self-scores and others in the creative, not too many extensions in the reactive, but what did stand out was his courageous authenticity was lower than he would have liked, and his passive was a little higher, as was his critical. So we had a conversation around that, and he was a very bright young lad, had really done well in his career, and I could see that he had a lot of good thoughts, but he was reluctant to point things out, particularly to his boss. The environment that he works in is quite a challenging one, and there is a lot of fear in the system around, you know, speaking up. You've got to keep your head down, or you might be overlooked, or bad things will happen. So although he would notice things often, like his boss may be putting a presentation together and ask him to have a look at it, and he wouldn't point out what he was seeing that could have been an improvement, because he was reluctant to give that feedback to his boss for fear. But then later on down the track, he'd come in and say something, and it was a little bit too late then, and the boss would continually say, you know, why don't you tell me earlier? And he's never actually shared with his boss the fear, because in the past he has been shot down when he's challenged his boss. So we really talked a lot about the fact that, you know, it's about just doing it when he has those thoughts, because, you know, so often his perspective is a really important one. And I said, you know, it's really about just doing it. It seems like you know what to do, but you're not doing what you know. And he said, oh, everybody tells me that. So I think often when you're working with reducing some of the reactive and increasing authenticity, it's about little baby steps. And for him, he had JDI as a statement, just do it. but we added an N onto it. Just do it now. You know, trust your intuition in the moment. And so he's working on that, and I think that's going to make a big difference to his profile. So what else have we got? Admits mistakes and takes responsibility. Yes, because the whole focus here is I learn from my mistakes, and I'm not threatened by having made a mistake. I'm not going to make it over and over again, but I will certainly learn from it. Expresses emotions constructively. So it's not just what they say, but it's very much about how they say it. So yeah, they say things in a way that people can hear. Respect others' opinions. We've talked about that, even if they disagree. And I guess for me, there's a statement that comes to mind from my conflict resolution days, is when there is a problem, it's the problem that's attacked, not the person. The person doesn't feel less than or put down. It's like, you know, let's focus on the problem and let me be supportive of you in the process of that. And because of their courage, they will challenge others directly. So people aren't left wondering what they're thinking or what they're feeling. So, anything else to add, ladies?
Oh, sounding good.
Sounding great.
So, let's move on. Kerry.
Right. Actually, I've got my screen is. My screen has.
It's playing hard to get.
Yes, my screen has gone somewhere. I'm just trying to get it up. Does someone want to just?
Mine did too a couple of times, Kerry. I just had to sign in again.
Oh, did you?
Judy, do you want to lead? Do you want to lead off on this while Kerry's finding her way?
Yep, sure. So from certification, you will remember the what's at risk process that we demonstrated with you, and then we gave you an opportunity to practice that with each other. And the purpose of the what's at risk process, of course, is to get clear on, you know, what are the beliefs and assumptions that are holding us back from being more creative. Remember that in the creative competencies, our identity is not at stake, but it's when we're feeling unsafe and insecure that we get in our own way. So we focus on staying safe by not offending other people. We may not say exactly what we think, or sugarcoat, or not say it at all. You know, it might be that we're feeling that we're right, that, you know, we've got the intellect and we've worked it all out. And if we're feeling superior to others or trying to prove ourselves, that certainly gets in the way of connecting with others. So the quickest way to get triggered by the reactive is when we feel disconnected from that sense of self and our purpose and our vision and our values. We're more focused on remaining safe and secure. And, you know, often it's unconscious. It just gets us. You know, it's that compulsive that unless I do this, you know, make out that I know what I'm saying and feeling safe, who am I? So the near enemy.
Jude, just before you go into near enemy, just with that, I think there's also the ways in which we do it. You know, for instance, in the complying sort of way that we might stay safe. You know, where we really attend to others' needs and let go of our own, or the controlling way of staying safe, which is, you know, really feeling our sense of responsibility to make things happen and get things done and get the task accomplished, you know. So we have, you know, those other ways of of you know, trying to stay safe. So there's all three sort of ways of staying safe.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So the near enemy, you'll remember again from certification that the near enemy of relating is complying. The near enemy of achieving is controlling. And the near enemy of authenticity is protecting. And as we've discussed, that gets triggered when, you know, I've got to be right and I've got to prove that I'm right. So we're not asking for other people's perspectives. We're just so focused on getting our point across. It can also be triggered when we're feeling vulnerable. So someone high in protecting would be reluctant to expose their weaknesses, and because they're very rational thinkers. So if they're feeling that their ideas, their perspective is not being taken on board, that it's being discounted, that can trigger them as well. So power and influence to contribute to the vision is then threatened. And in order to feel safe, I need to hide my true emotions in order not to feel vulnerable. And I'm just thinking of coaching sessions that I've done, and what often comes out in those coaching conversations, people will say, or they'll get to the point, hopefully, that what they've done in the past, you know, worked and it got them to where they are now. But if they can realize that it's no longer working for them, that it is a compulsive reaction, you know, in order to protect their identity and to feel safe and secure, then they can begin the journey of noticing when they're triggered, slowing things down enough, you know, listen to that self-talk, you know, examine their old beliefs and assumptions that underlie that, and then make a conscious choice to do something different. You know, to focus on, you know, what is it that I'm really wanting to achieve now, and is what I was about to do going to achieve that? Yeah.
Beautiful.
So Kerry, are you back online?
I think she's got a problem with the sound.
Yeah,
I'm
she
seeing a
has.
message that she's got some problem with the sound.
She's going to try logging back in to see if that'll help.
Okay.
So Judy, do you want to go on with the next one?
Yes, sure.
The underlying beliefs?
Yeah, was there anything else you wanted to add to what's at risk?
Ah, doing such a great job. No, there's nothing for me to add.
For me, I'm always looking for, I don't even have to look for, there is always an opportunity, you know, sometimes in the debriefs, but always in coaching, to do that what's at risk process with people. And it's just so powerful to and it often comes out, you know, if you remember the patterns and habits questions that we recommend that you ask up front after the context questions with your clients, often you can hear in what they're saying there what the beliefs and assumptions are. So it's a very powerful component, I think, of the circle. Okay, so let's have a look at the underlying beliefs. So these are taken directly from the self-development guide, the profile binder that you were given at certification. So these are from page 34. And of course your clients receive the same binder at the debrief. So again, yeah, these are some examples, and you may have more that you'd like to add. So these are internal motivators. So it's no wonder when you consider that authenticity is made up of integrity and courageous authenticity, that these are the underlying beliefs. So worthy, whether people approve of me or not, whether I succeed or not. So I'm self-authoring and I don't need to look for approval. It's more important to me to remain true to myself than to live up to others' expectations. So again, it's that inside-out operating system. I maintain my self-esteem and security by being true to myself. That's the congruence there. What I'm saying, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling are all in alignment. And it's important for me to be in integrity with myself. It's my greatest source of power, is my personal integrity. And I know when I'm out of integrity. Authentically admit my part in the problems that we face. So there's a real sense of taking responsibility. And that's an expression of integrity. True to my vision and values. And I seek to be the change I want to see in the world. So I'm proactive in focusing on what matters most. So, anything else to add, Sarah?
No, not from me. I'm wondering if anyone's come across any particular beliefs, either their own or working with clients, that they would add to this. Or any questions or comments from...
There was one question that I passed on to you, Sarah.
Yep.
Can you see that one about authentic language and the possible impact in different cultures?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting area, certainly from my experience from working with different cultures. There are we can see different ways in which people express this, which, in different cultures there's kind of different modes. But still at the core, it has all these features. And it's actually, the thing that I've found interesting working with different cultures is that when we move into the creative and expressing from the creative, it's actually when we see less cultural difference, whereas in the reactive, my experience is we see more cultural difference. So the way a culture expresses anger, or the style in which they express anger, or the style in which they express, autocrat or whatever. But in the creative, I find that it starts to be less of a distinction. You can start to see the similarities in the cultures rather than the difference. But also there is obviously a cultural overlay in terms of the way a particular culture expresses something. That would be my perspective. But Kerry and Judy, you might have other views, and other people on the line. I mean, I notice Angela Spaxman's got her hand up, and she works in Asia, so that's where she is. So,
Angela, feel free to. What's your question or comment?
Yes, actually, my comment was related to, I was just kind of tuning into these internal assumptions, and there was a kind of emphasis on being true to ourselves. And as I sort of tuned into that myself from that place of authenticity, I was realizing that that it's not there's no defensiveness at all there. So even though I would be checking in with myself and what I'm feeling, but also there's a sense of, a greater self. So there's the sort of the small self, but then I'm not connected, I'm not so attached to that. So I just think that description was slightly missing in the way this is worded, and I think it's very important because I think there's quite a big difference. Maybe that's part also of the difference between, being critical and being authentic.
Good point. Thanks, Angela. Angela, would you have any perspective, because you work with different cultures, I mean many different cultures that you're working with in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Do you see any differences that the culture impacts on the authentic language? The way in which people speak about or articulate their authenticity?
Yes, I think there is there are differences, and I really related to what you said, though, also, Sarah, that as someone develops more, that there's less difference, and that I think that it's that people with a less self-awareness would be sort of more embedded in the culture and have less flexibility, and so then they would come across more, more different. Whereas
or more
when
even, or maybe even more stereotypical.
Yes, that's right. More stereotypical, and so they're not able to bridge the gap, but they're not often aware of the gap as much between what they're trying to communicate and how they're actually doing it through their language and behaviors.
Is that helpful for you, Renee?
I'll take her off
of
mute,
course.
Sarah. Hold on a moment. There we are. Okay. Go ahead.
Adele, I've just been texting Kerry, and she's got the slides, but she can't hear. I've suggested she may have muted herself.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a solution, Judy.
she's multitasking there.
I am.
Sarah, I'm just wondering, as we're about to go into the case study, which is Kerry's, I'm wondering if we shouldn't flick ahead, and I can talk about the coaching strategies, your near enemy and opposites at this point, giving Kerry a bit more time to check in. What do you think?
Sure, yes. And I'm also aware of the time, so we do need to keep moving on. So what slide do you want me to go to?
Okay, if you can go to slide 26.
Okay. Let's see. How does that work for you?
Beautiful. Thank you. So 2 slides.
So Renee, I hope we've answered your question. I was just saying to Renee, I hope we answered her question.
Yeah. So on the left, it's a view of what we call reactive protecting, and what can frequently be the impact on authenticity, as well as self-awareness and, of course, systems awareness. So as we said earlier, the near enemy of relating is complying. The near enemy of achieving is controlling. We'll often work with the near enemy, and we'll often work with the opposites, where complying can have a very strong impact on achieving and complying on relating. But of course, yes, thank you. With protecting and authenticity, they're both the near enemy and the opposites. So the right-hand slide, this is a view of when people are using the gifts and the strengths of protecting and have grown them up into the creative. So, whereas an overuse of distance can have people coming across as looking aloof, the distance allows that perspective where you're not caught up in the emotions of others and can still think rationally. The gift of critical, of course, is you can be the devil's advocate and offer different perspectives. And with arrogance, of course, it's confidence. So it's about being able to work with people that are overrating their protecting tendencies. So the work's really about understanding what's awareness and authenticity with the team and with others, as distinct from that compulsive protecting, defending myself and my mind. So let's have a look now at the correlations. You remember this from certification. Correlation between authenticity and protecting. So it's a downward movement. So the stronger the protecting, the lower the authenticity. However, you'll notice that there is a scattered effect which takes into account that there are other gifts in the protecting. So it's a negative 0.39, and 0.4, of course, is considered moderate. So let's look now at the correlation between leadership effectiveness and protecting. Again, downward movement, negative correlation, negative 0.58, so that's verging on strong. Again, scattered effect, showing the gifts of protecting. And then we have leadership effectiveness and authenticity. In this instance, it is an upward positive movement, so as authenticity increases, so too does leadership effectiveness. And it's positive to the point of 0.78, so that's verging on very strong. So in terms of working with lower authenticity scores, the first place to take the client is to the questions that relate to that dimension. And then, you know, as a coaching strategy, have the client look at these from time to time and just rate how well they're currently doing with them. So let's have a look at those questions. So here we go. Courageous authenticity. This is how you can hold your clients accountable. I surface the issues others are reluctant to talk about. So the willingness to take risks. I speak directly even on controversial issues because what matters most is the best outcome for all of us. And I'm courageous in meetings, so my identity is not at stake. And then the questions for integrity. I exhibit personal behaviour consistent with my values. I walk my talk. And I do this during good and bad times. You know, I can hold my own when I'm speaking the truth. I can stand in the heat without fear of losing your approval. And I do this in a manner that's completely aligned with my values. And if my values are not aligned, I will voice that. So, and I've just lost the slides now.
What?
Here we go. So opposites as well as near enemy, we've talked about that. Let's go to the next slide. Here we go. Opposites, and the next slide. Same circle, near enemy. So
Judy, I might just point out that this is the misunderstanding that people often have. So with the protecting, underestimating the impact of the protecting. And, you know, so you get that sort of picture where there's a gap here and there's the shading extended down the bottom. So that's helping them understand that distinction. And
yes.
Same with the near enemy.
Yes.
Sorry, just to quickly.
No, that's great, thanks. So Robert Fritz, who wrote the book Path of Least Resistance, he has drawn on the scientific fact that energy travels where it's easiest to go. So it's really about how can we harvest those gifts that are in the protecting. It's not about not having protecting at all. How can we harvest those and grow them up into the creative? And I think that's all I want to say about that, Sarah, unless you want to add something.
No, that's fine. Look, I've just noticed that it's 8:31, and I've just had a message from Adele saying that Kerry can't get back on. So she's suggesting that we record the case studies separately.
That's a good idea.
I think that might be a good idea, so we can walk through that example and bring that to you at a later stage. Because if she can't get on, we're a bit stymied because it's her case study. So I think that brings us to what I think is a lovely slide for us to end on. And Nothing Ever Goes Away Until It Has Taught Us What We Need to Know by Pema Chodron. So, you know, that's the beauty of the reactive tendencies that limit our authenticity, and what is it that we need to learn from those reactive tendencies so that they can then be transformed into the fullness and the greatness that's available from our authenticity. And so this continuous journey, I mean, I find myself, I don't know if you have the same experience, but I find myself just in awareness around this, the refinements that keep coming over and over again. And just when I think, oh, I've really got a handle on that, I have a new insight and a new awareness that brings another refinement. And, you know, that's what I really love about this, is that it calls on us to be aware and to notice and to, you know, notice more subtleties and more subtleties. And in that refinement, then this greater capacity to handle complexity and greater capacity to handle the very confusing and paradoxical situations and hold space for others in that becomes possible. So our next webinar that's in the series, which is the deep dive around the circle, is systems awareness. And that's going to be on Wednesday, the 5th of October. And so you'll get a notice from TLC about that. And then what I'd like to do, even though we'll close off the session because we did say we'd finish at 8:30, we'll leave it open so that if anybody wants to stay with any questions or comments or deepen the conversation on what we've covered tonight, we'll be available for a short while to do that. So, yeah.
Sarah,
so
if I can just interrupt, Wednesday is the 1st of October. Sunday is the 5th.
Right. Adele, can you help us with that?
Yeah, you were talking about the next session.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next session isn't until the 22nd of October.
Oh, right. So,
yeah, it's out of our normal sequence, so it kind of fits with the end of the year because we only have 2 more to do, systems awareness and self-awareness.
okay, so 22nd of October.
Yeah.
I stand corrected.
Sorry, I'm distracted by trying to get Kerry online.
Look, I want to say a very special thank you to Judy and Kerry for the wonderful work that they've done in preparing for the session. So thank you very, very much for the work that you've done, Judy, and the wonderful way in which you've presented it.
Oh, you're welcome, Sarah.
And what I'd love to do is just open to any questions, comments, and I completely understand if anyone needs to leave. You have families and lives, but we're certainly happy to stay on for a little while for any questions or comments that people want to explore. Barb Wilby did offer us a comment. She said, Sarah, to add to your point, re similarities rather than perceiving differences, I feel we see the universal truths underlying the different forms manifested in different cultures, hence the sense of similarity. Oh, it's a lovely point.
Isn't that lovely? Good on you, Barbara.
So any other questions or comments? Just put your hand up so that we know.
No, that seems to be it, Sarah.
Yes. So Adele, do you open that up before we sign off so that people can say goodbye, or do you unmute it?
Generally not. We can try. Just sometimes, as we got at the beginning, it becomes a
it gets a bit noisy.
It does. But we will record the case study comments and send that recording through.
Okay, lovely. Well, that's a great solution. See, we can be flexible. We can be creative. We can find alternatives. And hopefully we can manage our disappointment as well.
So thank you, everyone. I think we're done, and you will get a link to this recording in 2 days' time. And we hope to see you at the next one on the 22nd.
Thanks for organising, Adele.
Thanks. Good night, everyone.